And welcome everyone that's watching us on Facebook. We know that we're live on there now. And I think that's pretty much everyone now, Jared.
Okay, just getting the final Facebook Live has now started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. We actually have a bit of a record today. I think there was over 600 registrations today. So wow. We feel how much people are looking towards employment if you're currently not employed or looking to change jobs, and also some of the anxiety that this current pandemic is causing. A lot of people have lost their jobs, and there's a lot of students, some reading from some of the forums online, that are still studying at the minute and getting very anxious about what's going to happen at the end of their study and what jobs might be available, and also what learning online might mean for your job readiness. So we will no doubt address a lot of those issues today. We are joined today by Megan, who you'll see in the red top, and thank you very much for joining us today, Megan. We're going to be talking about job hunting and TV and CV skills, and CV skills also includes LinkedIn, and we're going to talk a bit about that today as well. I am Jared Holland, and I'm your co-host today, along with Dominic Saporito, who is also in a black shirt. We are both founders of Outcome.Life, which is a business that Dom and I started to help international students with employability and career-related employability. We believe that if you're studying a certain degree, it's because you want to get a job in that field. And so we do lots of things like networking events and webinars like this. We run a startup pre-accelerator for international students. And we also do a lot of internship placements for international students. If you have any questions today, you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom that there is a question and answer box there. Dominic is ready to go to answer your questions, and Dom will raise them with myself and with Megan predominantly, and we will answer questions throughout this webinar today, as opposed to just waiting at the end. So Dom will be filtering through them. We'll also answer some in the box. Although we would love to hear from people in that question and answer box, what are the biggest challenges that you're currently finding in your job hunt? So please put them in there, because we will be able to tailor this conversation to address the key themes.
Actually, in the chat box, you can put what your issues are, and just questions in the question box, which would be good. Thank you.
Today's webinar is brought to you by Study New South Wales. We're very thankful for the support of Study New South Wales. They are an organisation that was established in 2014 by the New South Wales government to support international students studying in New South Wales. And one of their key pillars is to improve the experiences for international students. And the Study New South Wales team has been working absolutely tirelessly this year. There's been a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety for international students. And the team there have really been working around the clock to try and support international students. I'm sure everyone has experienced a lot of that change, particularly if you're studying. People at work are now working at home. People that are studying that used to go to university are now watching lectures online and doing shoots online. So I don't think there's anyone, no matter how old you are, that hasn't been affected, including young school kids. So today we're going to talk about what a good and bad resume looks like. And why you need a clear and concise resume, what your resume is actually used for. I think you'll be surprised by this. I think a lot of people think a resume is actually for one purpose. Megan's going to explain to you that it's probably not exactly what you think it is. The information that you need to include, some cliches around your CV, but then also the main thing, a real key focus for today, is to make sure you understand that a CV is only a small part of your job seeking strategy. There are many other components, and you've got to make sure you get that balance right. A quick bio on Megan. Megan Edwards is a LinkedIn strategist and a content marketer for over 20 years. And she began her marketing career back when print advertising was a dominant marketing channel. Megan helps businesses of all sizes build an online presence to support their business goals, and with a key focus on personal brand, lead generation, and authority. Megan is a lifelong wordsmith and educator, has a passion for making it simple for anyone to create great content and also leverage the power of LinkedIn. A couple of more interesting things about Megan. Megan loves to sing and dance. Now, I don't understand what this is, Megan, but you're a Lindy Hop performer at Crown Casino. What is that?
It's, if you think the 30s and 40s era of dancing, you know, like the Glenn Miller era. Lots of people being, you know, flipped over their partner's shoulder and through their partner's legs and all of that sort of thing. That was me.
Wow, at Crown Palladium.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you also studying meditation techniques? And I mean, I don't know how anyone does this, but you're writing a novel.
Yes. Well, it started as one and it seems to have turned into multiple stories. So I'm not sure whether that's going to become one omnibus or multiple novels at the moment. But yeah, it's underway.
Oh, good luck with it. It's my mum wrote a book, and you have to put so much time and effort and commitment into it. So anyone that's an author, you have my utmost respect.
Thank you.
But welcome today, Megan. Thank you so much for taking up the time to spend time with us today. First of all, just how are you? How are you finding this the COVID-19 situation that we're in? And I do understand that you have a cat called Lady Gaga that has kept you company during isolation. So maybe that's the key, to get a cat to help with this time.
Absolutely. Look, I think the impact of being distanced from people affects all of us. So whether that company is four-legged or two-legged, I think it's still equally powerful, and maybe better when it is four-legged. They don't argue back. Or, well, she has her own opinions on things, but COVID's been a really interesting time for me, because a lot of what I do, even though I do a lot of events, can be done virtually, or the writing obviously can be done behind the scenes. But I do miss being in front of people physically in a room where I can walk up and lay my hands on their shoulders while I'm talking to them and you know, play around with people and use all sorts of props, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's been a great opportunity to just let the internal chatter drop. That's been my biggest thing.
Yeah, I think I've actually enjoyed that part of COVID myself. It's actually forced us to slow down a little bit. I don't want it to go for too long, but in some ways it's sort of meant you spend more time with certain people when you can, but also take a bit of a step back, because life can be such a hectic race all the time. That has been one nice thing that I've enjoyed, is being forced to slow things down a little bit.
Yeah, and it gives you an appreciation for how you can do your thing in multiple ways. You know, there's more than one way to solve the problem, which is beautiful.
Being adaptable is just so important. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that today.
And patient.
Yeah, absolutely being patient is. I struggle with being patient, and Dom will attest to that. Being my business partner, it's something that I think about. Something I think about all the time is you do need to be patient, because everything doesn't happen in 5 minutes, but it's a really hard thing to make yourself do.
And I think it's a big thing for international students too, in that we know that some of you are really struggling to get work here, and all the questions that are coming through talking about, you know, this thing of, if you don't have local experience, no one wants to hire you, but if you don't get hired, how do you get local experience? Trust me, it will all come together. We've seen it 1,000 times before, or 6,000 times before, actually, with 6,000 students that we've placed. Trust us, be patient. It'll all come good for you in the end.
Yeah. Now, there's a number of different things we do want to talk about today in the job hunting process. It's not all about CVs. We meet a lot of international students that think the CV is the only important thing. Once they've got a good CV, they'll be getting 20 job offers. It's one little cog in the wheel, but I do want to address the CVs first, and I'm going to share my screen just now, if I can find the right page. Here we go. And what I want to, if you asked, I hope everyone can see my screen, Dom and Megan, that can be seen. Yep.
Yep. All good.
Great. So if we asked 100 people to advice on a CV, then you would get 100 different answers. And so what I did want to do was just quickly look at a CV. And then I wanted to, one, talk about what I like about it, what could be improved, and same with Dom and Megan. Now, there is no be and end all for a CV. But what I like about this CV is there's a nice concise summary at the top. I like that this person has gone and listed their skills straight, bang, top of your face. They've put the stuff that they can actually do. And this is really important because there's certain tasks you can do that is what employees are looking for. They've then got their experience, and they have actually included their retail experience. We get asked a lot, do I put down that I worked at McDonald's? Absolutely you do. And then they've got their education and training. I see a lot of student and graduate CVs where they put the education first. I don't care about the education. I want to know what your experience is. So the experience comes up higher. And then I like that they've got some hobbies. I played basketball for 20 years. I love that this person has played basketball. So for me, it's a very nice looking CV as well. And it's got the right things there in the right order. Megan, what are your thoughts? And you're on mute, Megan.
You're on mute.
There we go. My first impression is very text heavy, which turns me off, to be honest. I like that it is bullet pointed. That would definitely be my preference. And I would also say that it's really important that every resume have some little summary piece at the beginning, because just like your social media profiles, it's your introduction of yourself. It's your personality or your opportunity to state your case there and show who you are, rather than just a string of technical proficiencies. And that can be the distinguishing marker. If somebody reads a couple of lines of what you say about yourself and compares you apples with apples on skills. But yeah, from having spent 4 or 5 years in recruitment, I can tell you that most recruiters, firstly, they'll rely on a machine to look at it before they read it themselves. And if the right keywords aren't there, then it never gets to the recruiter's desk in the first place. But then you're looking at usually a junior recruiter or assistant looking at the hard copies. And if it looks too text heavy, then again, people's eyes glaze over. So yeah, cull it back, do a bit of research on what the top 3 to 5 things are that particular industry or niche is relevant to, and skim it back to that. You can always put these extra things later on, but go straight to, here are my top 5 skills. Secondary ones, leave them to the end. Maybe you need to have a couple of different versions of resumes as well for different roles, in which case you can swap those top ones around if you think that you are strong in more than 3 to 5. But you've got to go hard on a few key things and not try to be a jack of all trades. So.
And Dom?
Yeah, look, I mean, this particular CV that we chose it because it's actually quite nice. I mean, I like this CV. I agree there may be a little bit too much text. And the context that I talk about CVs is that I was a recruiter for 14 years myself, having placed about 1,000 people into jobs. And we do this now, placing students into internships. And as a recruiter, whenever we would place a job, especially when we listed it on Seek, we would get 200 to 300 applications a day. And therefore, if the CV that you're sending in is not clear and simple, we are just going to push it aside. And there was a couple of people who've asked questions about, you're not getting any response from recruiters from applications when you send your CV in. That's why. They are so overwhelmed by people just sending in applications. So Al Ham, I think you asked, is there a specific format? No, but to be concise and clear. And this one here is a particularly good one, but at the same time, it's just one part of what you need in order to get a job.
Thanks, Dom, and thanks to Megan. I did just want to put up another CV quickly, because this one just is a little bit different and shows some personality, which I think is quite a good thing to do these days. But you can see here that this person has just really gone out of their way to make a really vibrant CV. They've even sort of put a bit of a timeline on it. Now, Dom mentioned before that recruiters get 200-300 applications for a role in a day. When they see this one, they're going to take notice, and they're going to look a little bit extra hard with it, and at least it's got their attention. And that's the biggest challenge to get first, get their attention.
And it's the hardest thing always to get the attention of the recruiter. Now, if I was recruiting a design person, a creative person, this is what I would expect, because that's the job they're going to do. If it was an accountant or an engineer, probably not. The other CV would be more appropriate. However, look how pretty this is. And remember, we're trying to put this forward to a company. And I would be so proud, as long as the person is a good person, to put this forward to a company. Really what you're trying to do is make yourself stand out. And this one really does that. Great CV.
And Don, do you notice that they've put a QR code here with their portfolio? What do you think about that?
I like it because it's contemporary. And I think that there's a lot of employers these days that they are looking for graduates from university because they're coming with a fresh approach and a fresh mind to things. And I don't even understand what a QR code is. I know I can scan it. I wouldn't know how to do one. But I tell you what, if you've got a creative person that's put that in their CV, that is top of the list, gets my interest. Do you agree, Megan?
I do, absolutely. And yes, where it's appropriate, there are going to be people on the receiving end, like many, that don't know what it's for. The other thing that is fantastic in the context of these sorts of sectors, especially having come from a creative background myself, is any demonstration of your craft. You know, so if you're a writer, as I have always been, you've got to show that everything is word perfect. Like the first thing I saw on that was a spelling mistake straight off the bat before I absorbed the pretty design and so on. You know, so yeah, you're targeting to your audience, but the layout is beautiful. I agree.
Yeah.
And Dom and Megan, what do you think about putting on experience that maybe isn't professional experience, but, you know, maybe, look, I know one of my first jobs, I used to steam clean carpets and wash windows and clean toilets.
Love it.
Would I put that on my CV? It's got nothing to do with I applied to be an accountant. It's got nothing to do with it.
Oh, yes, it does. When I used to do the graduate recruitment for Picture Partners, we would look for people that worked in places like Hungry Jack's, Pizza Hut, even McDonald's, because working in those places shows that A, you're very humble, which is what everybody loves, but also you've worked as a team, you've worked to a process, and you've dealt with the worst people on the planet, which is the public. So those three things is a huge benefit to put on there. So definitely include them. Even experience from overseas, very important. Internationals worry about putting their experience from overseas. We love it.
And would you agree with that, Megan? All experience can be relevant?
I think it can be relevant. Look, in the sectors that I tend to work with most, it becomes less and less relevant as you progress through, once you have a couple of runs on the board, you know. But definitely in the early days. But I think you've got to elevate what you've got from that role. Don't leave it up to the recruiter to interpret what you got from it.
Yeah.
If it's a Hungry Jack's role, say specifically, you know, I led a team, or I had to incorporate, you know, constant changes in process, or, you know, deal with rush hours of 1,000 people in 2 hours, or whatever it happened to be. Give some clear, you know, interesting facts about it.
Yeah, and Renju, terrific comment. What if you don't have any previous experience? Well, then what you really need to start highlighting then is what you do in your spare time. You may not have worked because you play sport, or you study music, or you love to research things in your own time. And they're the things that you need to highlight. What we don't want to see is a CV that has no experience and that you've sat around playing the latest game on, you know, with your mates on the internet. Even if it's true, we don't want to see that on your CV.
Dom, I see a couple of questions coming through about recruiters not getting back to them. When you had your recruitment company, if you had to personally get back to everyone that applied, how many staff would you need to have? just to reply to people.
Nightmare, absolute nightmare. And so therefore, I think that if anyone is applying to jobs on job boards, do not expect them to get back to you unless they want to see you for an interview. And the big issue is that it's so easy you could send out 100 applications in one evening. And so that's why recruiters don't get back to everyone, because it's just too easy. And so for people to apply, and the wrong people are applying. And so hence, do not be worried if no one gets back to you.
We see a lot of students spending a disproportionate amount of time on their CVs compared to the other important aspects of job hunting. So now that we've sort of covered off on the CV, Megan, what are the other really important considerations of job hunting?
Well, glad you asked. Look, to be honest, the resume or the CV plays a poor second to platforms like LinkedIn in particular these days. Firstly, because most of our interactions, social and professional, are online to begin with. And because in a professional capacity, anybody who is your potential employer or a recruiter is doing their fact finding online as well before they have a conversation with you. So you have to be found in that place. We're not relying on things coming through the post, through the mail anymore to land on your desk. And LinkedIn is growing at a rate of knots, absolutely phenomenal. It is industry agnostic. There are people there who I've coached that are still students going through their last years of study, who don't necessarily have very much to talk about yet, but they have an opinion about the sector they want to go in. They have something to say on there just as much as the CEO who's been in the corporate sector for 40 years. It's just become the go-to place. So if you're not leveraging that, you're mad, to be honest. And it looks more suspicious if you don't have a presence there than if you do. Like 10 years ago, if a company didn't have a website, nobody thought twice of it. Today, you give someone a brand and they don't have a website to back them up, you wonder why. LinkedIn's the same now.
Yeah, I know definitely that I find that I will look at someone's CV, 2-3 seconds, but I could spend up to 5 minutes on their LinkedIn profile. And in Dom and I, in our businesses, we have hired over 60 people. And I've looked at everyone's LinkedIn profile, and anyone didn't have a LinkedIn profile didn't get an interview. But I'm more than happy to spend a bit of time in their LinkedIn profile, but I just glimpse past the CV. Are you finding now that is just so common?
It is. And what is just as common too is recruiters taking it a step further and saying, well, this person clearly just cut and pasted their CV or resume onto a LinkedIn profile. That's not good enough. So get onto LinkedIn is step one, but make it specific to the platform is number two. But yeah, it's the place that you need to be found, and people are dismissing applicants who aren't there for sure.
So if we're saying that that as employers, we spend more time looking at LinkedIn profiles than we do at CVs, wouldn't we probably recommend that someone that's looking for a job should spend far more time preparing their LinkedIn profile than they should preparing their CV? Easily.
Look, your CV provides the raw information. Yeah. Then you jump onto LinkedIn and you're dealing with anything that you would do if you're in an online environment. The visuals, the functions, the search engine optimization. And that's probably at the heart of really getting traction on a platform like LinkedIn, is getting very clear what are the keywords for my sector, not in my head, but actually being utilized in the professional market, in the employment market.
Yeah.
So,
and are we starting to see, I haven't seen this happen myself personally, but I'd love to get your insight on this. If someone's applying for a job directly, so say they've got the line manager, they're not having to go through a job board, and they've said, look, send me through your CV. are people now writing an email with a short sort of covering the email and just sending their LinkedIn profile and not even sending a CV? Has that started happening yet? Or have you seen that before?
Well, I guess there's two parts to the answer there. Yes, I think the preference for some sort of introductory message is still there. It's a lot shorter than it used to be. It's not the traditional attach a Word document as a cover letter type of thing. The exception to that, I would say, and this came across my desk only this week for someone who's working in a Japanese university now, if you're in the academic circles, the formality of a letter still is very well received. But generally, when you're dealing with recruitment companies particularly, they just want you to acknowledge that you maybe have had a conversation or seen an ad, attach your profile, and yes, create a PDF of your LinkedIn profile rather than a Word document CV. And that way they know it's a living, breathing thing they can go and verify online.
And Megan, you mentioned before that, spending time on CVs, it's not just the words you put on there also, but it's the connections that you make. I know that, Jared, you talk about this a lot, but the greatest thing about your LinkedIn profile are the people that you're connected to. And I even have this with my own children who are in university now. I say to them that part of their job with their LinkedIn is to connect to at least 100 people of significance in the area that they wish to get employed a year, because you will be judged by the people that you're connected with. And so I think the power of LinkedIn, which takes quite a bit of time, is to build up a group of connections that can, shows your credibility when you're going for a job.
It is credibility. The bar keeps getting raised, though. I sound like the proverbial rain cloud in this discussion today, but the bar has been raised even in that respect, because there are 657 million people on LinkedIn now. A lot of the senior people, the decision makers who are hiring or getting the final say on hires these days are not active themselves. They've got somebody else monitoring their profile or their activity for them, or they simply don't have a presence. So you have to do a little bit of homework to see, well, I'm asking to connect with Dom. Does he actually do anything on LinkedIn, or did he set up a LinkedIn profile 5 years ago and he hasn't touched it since? He may be the right person, but is LinkedIn the right channel for me to communicate with him and build that relationship?
A quick question too, and this one came from Tamana. Covering letters. Covering letters still relevant? I know I never read them, ever. Couldn't care less for a covering letter. Do you look at them? Is it worth adding? I
don't think you can send a document without any preamble. You just, as I said before, just have to acknowledge who you're talking to. Would
you ever make a decision on whether you would interview someone from the covering letter?
Not unless they'd made a big blunder, in which case they would not get looked at. But no.
So you're saying send a covering letter so that you don't get rejected. However, you don't need to spend too much time on it, because all the information should be in the CV or on your LinkedIn profile. So it's just an intro to your CV. Good stuff. Okay. Well, yes. I feel better now that I never read them, because they're not that important. You just got to have one.
But cool. Dom, I think the difference there is, if you're randomly sending an application and attaching a cover letter, it's unlikely to get noticed. But if you already have a relationship with someone, so if someone's gone through your pre-accelerator program, Dom, and then they're applying for a role with you, they're sending you, and remember, if someone sends an email to you or a cover letter, it's the same thing. Whether you put it in a PDF or a Word document, it's in an email, same thing. But if they knew you and they put a cover letter around it and said, hey, Dom, I really enjoyed the pre-accelerator. You talked about this in your business. This is how I could add value to your business. I'm going to go and do this for you.
Yeah.
You would take notice of that. But the key differentiator is that it's a warm application, not a cold application. And I think it's something we need to address in this webinar, is that you actually want to avoid the job boards. You want to avoid doing cold applications. My view is you should only ever apply for a job if you know someone that works there or someone's introduced you into that organization. So it's about channeling all your energy into the areas where you're most likely to get impact. And I'd like to throw that over to Megan with all your experience too, is that we all know that it's much easier to get success if you've got a warm lead to go on. And so in the graduate market, where a lot of graduates are just spamming applications, how can they, one, make sure that they're sort of having warm applications, but two, is there ways to hack LinkedIn to make sure or give yourself a better chance to actually be having a warm application?
Dom?
Oh, look, I think it's terrific when you can. I mean, you've got to know someone in an organisation. If you know someone in an organisation beforehand, and this goes to one of the questions that was asked very early on by Alham: how can we network in social distancing? So there's a lot of webinars at the moment, and I think that all international students should be going to at least 2 or 3 of these online webinars each week. And that's where you can get to know people. So we've really given people permission to connect with us today on LinkedIn. And so that's when you can start to introduce yourself and start a conversation, because then at any future time, if we're advertising a job, you can say, hey, Dom, I remember your webinar that you did on the 11th of August. You know, at that time you spoke about this and I connected with you. Can I please apply for the job? There's some connection there. So I think it's really important that if you can, you've got to differentiate yourself, because we're bombarded with so many applications for every single job these days. You just got to find some way to get in front of the person. But I think this whole thing on a CV to me is, no one has ever gotten a job with a CV, ever. You get a job in the interview. So to me, the CV and the covering letter, it's all about getting the interview. And that's what it's all about. So whether it's a covering letter, the CV, your LinkedIn profile, the beautiful graphics that you put on there, differentiating yourself, doing an internship, it's all of those things together is there to get you an interview, because it's only in an interview where you're going to get the job. Because if you can't perform in an interview, it doesn't matter what you do with all those other documents, you are never going to get the job. And so that's how I see. And I like your point at the very start, Megan, where you said that, you know, a CV is just a small part of getting a job. And I think that internationals do spend far too much time really focused on a CV when they should be doing lots of other stuff to give them a chance of getting a job. Absolutely. Did that answer your question, Jared? I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you. Megan?
Look, I think that, yeah, definitely, yeah, in terms of proportion of time, a platform like LinkedIn has to be far more important or priority to you in terms of building those relationships with the people in organisations you want to get into. And if the person that is not the decision maker, or the person that is the decision maker, I should say, is not able to be connected with, then you have a look at what the other people in the company are doing. You know, you connect with them. But one of the key things where people crash on LinkedIn is they jump in, they connect with people that they think are of value to them. And that's where it stops. I think that's enough. If you've got, I mean, I certainly don't have the biggest network by any stretch, but I certainly don't spend a lot of time looking at every single person who connects with me. The ones who write an introductory message, though, I do. You've got to put an introductory message in. Don't rely on the standard LinkedIn, I'd like to connect with you, that it will paste onto the connection request for you.
Yep, Megan, I'm going to give that a big Study New South Wales high five. The number one thing that all the international students out there should be doing, and I want you to practice this with me, is sending a very personalised introductory note when you connect with us on LinkedIn. And the way it should work is something like, hi, Dom. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom about CVs and getting a job in the webinar today for Study Melbourne. You know, love to catch up for a coffee once we can again, something like that. Because if anyone, I can tell you now, anyone out there, if you try and connect with me without sending a note, I will ignore it. I just won't do it. And so very short, personalize it, thank someone for whatever it is that they've done for you. I think that's the way to start a conversation and a relationship on LinkedIn. Your thoughts, Megan? So that, again,
Yeah,
a big study, New South Wales, high five.
absolutely. And I think given, no, it's not even the gold standard anymore. It's the bare minimum to get cut through.
Yeah.
I certainly won't dismiss somebody who doesn't, but they've got to have a really attractive looking photograph and clear headline on their profile in that list of connection requests for me to want to click in and validate them.
I'm actually on the opposite of that, Megan. I currently have over 340 people that have asked to connect with me that I have just ignored.
Yes.
If someone tries to connect, and I've had people from PwC try to connect with me, and I've ignored them because if they can't take the time to tell me why they're connecting with me, I ain't accepting. And I think that's becoming the norm as well. People are getting, there's a lot of spam happening on LinkedIn now too. So
there is.
People are wary of the type of people that are connecting with them. And I value my network. So I'm not going to let anyone just connect with me. And while we're talking about connections, I think this is what a lot of, I think, graduates don't understand. The power of your connections on LinkedIn is just unbelievable. And I'll give you a little example. I'm currently trying to help a friend who's trying to look for a different job. And every time a role comes up on where they find it on Seek or wherever they find it, they let me know and they say, hey, Jared, do you know anyone that works at this company? I look up the company on LinkedIn and I see who I know that works there. And then so far, there's been 3 times I've known someone that's worked at 3 of the companies they've looked at. I've reached out to that person directly and said, hey, you guys are looking for this role. Can I refer someone to you? Without LinkedIn, I would never know that person worked there. So this is why the CV is a sort of tick the box thing, but you should spend your time building out your LinkedIn contacts because you will apply for a job one day and one of those contacts or a friend of a contact will work at that company. And then bang, you actually now have a warm application, right? You have cut through all the noise and all the mess. You're accessing the hidden job market and you're getting through in a much safer way that is going to give you success. So connections on LinkedIn, I think, is the most important thing.
So we've spoken now that CVs are not the be all and end all, although we have addressed it. It's important to have one, important to have a covering letter, but just as important, if not more important, LinkedIn. We got 21 questions here, and I'm going to do some quick fire question and answers. So please keep it nice and short, and either one of you two can answer these. But I think this one's for you, Jared, from Ashok. I think we've heard it from Ashok before. As a hiring manager, do you value remote internships, Jared?
Yes. And the quick one around that is that people that can adapt and can be flexible and can work in different environments, I think it's actually more valuable than doing an on-premise internship. You don't have someone holding your hand the whole time. So if you're doing remote internship instead of face-to-face, use it to your advantage. And during the pandemic, you adapted and you were able to still add value to organizations. It's an advantage, not a disadvantage.
Okay, so there's a couple of people here who wanted to take me to task on covering letters. Okay, you win. Covering letters are important, but I still don't really look at them much. I prefer to look at your LinkedIn. So thank you for that.
Can I intervene just for a second there?
Yeah.
What's to say they can't ask the question, would you like me to enclose a covering letter with my application?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that would be a good thing. And you're starting a conversation with them. Anything that you can do to start a conversation. I think one thing to remember, and this may answer a few of the questions, is that in Australia, we don't manufacture anything. We're not a manufacturing nation. We are a service economy. And so what people are really trying to do with CVs, covering letters, LinkedIn profiles, is that they're trying to find out about you as a person. This is not a country where the person with the highest marks gets the job, nor the person with the best skills. And Jared, you would say more often than most that technical skills, they're easy to teach, but it's difficult to teach attitude. So what you're really trying to do is to get your personality across in the best way you possibly can, which is why interests is really important to have on your CV. Do you favour applicants that reach out on LinkedIn after you have sent a traditional application online? What do you think, Megan?
Yes, I think I think it shows a bit of initiative. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
see why not.
So there's nothing wrong with it. You probably wouldn't
No.
favour them, but you like it that they've done that initiative.
I
Well,
think
it's like looking up a website. It's doing your homework.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and add to that, Dom, is that, and I've had this discussion with many people, is that if you know the person's going to be interviewing you, should you look them up on LinkedIn? And my answer is absolutely you should. Make sure they know that you have looked at their profile. It shows you being proactive. And another tip was that and this is what the guys at Social Garden said, is that they find that whenever they put up a job application, 100 people apply, only one person out of 100 ever calls the landline of the company and asks to speak to the hiring manager directly. And the guys at Social Garden said they always give that person an interview.
Okay, here's another one. Chung asked, is networking important, and how does he start networking given he's new to Australia?
Yes, well, obviously networking is extremely important.
How does he go about it?
And it's not as hard as you think. Go on meetup.com, go on Eventbrite, find some events, turn up. Now, at the minute, there's not as many events on during COVID, but you know, there still are things happening as things start to open up. So if you have to attend online events for now, attend from your living room in your pajamas on the couch. But it's not as hard as you think, but you must start.
This is one for you, Megan. This is from Ramu. Are most recruiters now using these systems that you were talking about to scan the CVs before they get them?
Yep.
They
all
are.
are.
And
Yep.
what can Rama do to ensure that they make the first cut?
One of the workarounds that the consultants used to recommend in my recruitment days was to look up the other jobs that company is advertising. So if you're looking for a job as a systems engineer and that recruitment company hires lots of people in that sector, go and look at the job ads that they've written, because the person interviewing you will be the person who has written a string of ads in that category before. That's the language that their system wants to see.
Okay.
That makes sense.
A shout out to Franz, who says that Franz works for us in Sydney. One of our students joined one of our webinars recently and got an internship through networking just after the webinar. So well done to that person who took the initiative to network with someone in the webinar and ended up giving an internship. We've had a couple of people here, Jared, ask, you know, how can they go about getting an internship? Could you let the listeners know what they can do if they need help with their internships?
Well, if you go to Outcome.Life, the website, we can obviously assist with that, but otherwise your universities may be providing internships. If they're not, go to Outcome.Life and you can come through to us and you can talk to one of our team. I did see a few questions there about people challenging or saying remote internships just as good. There's one thing to think about here. Every business has, unless you're essential services, has all their staff working at home at some point over the last 4 months. A remote internship is just like being a remote employee, which in post 15th of March 2020 is an employee because everyone's been working at home. So now we live in a world, there is no difference. Atlassian, Twitter, and Worley have all said globally their staff never have to go back to work, to the office, ever. Remote is the new work. So we got to give up this whole thing, oh, remote's not as good as on premises. The world's changed. Remote is the same as being on premises now. That's how businesses are going to operate.
Megan, here's one for you. Xiao Chiong, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, asked, should we include our photos on CVs? Now, I would say if you've got a face like mine, do not include it. But, you know, a lot of our students are a lot younger than me, Megan.
I don't think it really helps, to be honest. Okay. And a lot of people are like a deer in the headlights when they take a headshot anyway, so it doesn't do them any favors. Okay. If you're going to do it online though, rather than a hard copy CV, do a video message.
Wow, powerful, very good.
Because personality comes through, you know. Yes. They can hear how clear your pronunciation is. If they're a bit dubious when they see an international or non-Australian name, show them that you can clearly articulate. Show them what your facial expressions are, what your posture is, all those non-verbal cues.
And so what I like is that if you're very confident with your speech and articulation and so forth, play to your strengths. Do a short video and send it in because you know it's going to help you. What about the length of a CV? We've got 2 questions here, one from Karandeep. Should it be 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages? Is there too long? Is there too short?
I think 1 page is enough to say the important things. You can always put a footnote at the end that says, if you'd like more detail, I'm happy to provide it.
So 1 page, 2 at the most, perhaps.
Yes.
And include a link to your LinkedIn profile on the CV.
That's exactly the next thing I was going to say. Yes.
That's where we live in now. Like, you don't need to have everything on your CV because it's in your LinkedIn profile. So the objective of the CV should be actually to make them click on your LinkedIn profile.
So, so an anonymous attendee asked, how can we improve our CVs and applications? We've talked about it a lot today, but I think the message that has come across today is that it's not the be all and end all. Would that be fair to say, Megan?
That's correct. And just make sure that your language it matches the terms that the job you're applying for is using. You know, it's like if you looked at an ad in the newspaper years ago, you would look at the language that the recruiter had written in the ad and make sure that you mentioned those keywords in your covering letter and your resume. If the computer can't match that word with that word, you're less likely to get noticed.
Yeah. And someone's asked whether.
So I was going to say, Dom, just to come back to that cover letter for 1 second, the whole conversation around a cover letter, and maybe we missed it. The point of a cover letter, I actually think, is that you're actually taking the time to tailor an application. If you're doing cover letters as a generic cover letter, you're sending to more than one business, you are wasting your time. If you are sending an extremely tailored cover letter that you have spent at least half an hour making extremely focused for that job, then it will have an impact. But you've got to make sure that you are going deep into the application and making extremely personalized. Generic cover letters don't work. Very tailored cover letters do.
So this is for you, Megan. I think Talina asks, she has done quite a few volunteering jobs. Should she include this in her CV?
Absolutely. And don't assume that people know who the organisation is. So, you know, a single line that says they support this area of the community, and a single line that says, here's what the resulting skills were, you know, teamwork, whatever it happened to be.
I feel like really relevant. Our message hasn't got across in this webinar, because that question should have said, I have done lots of volunteering. Should I include that in my LinkedIn profile?
Yeah.
But students are still asking.
Big study Melbourne, study New South Wales, high five, Jared.
They're still saying, should I include it in my CV? Well, put it in your LinkedIn profile though. Like we've got to drum this into young people that you've got to start thinking about LinkedIn more so than your CV. And we've really got to emphasize that.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's a beautifully clear-cut section on LinkedIn for your volunteer experience that is separate from your employment history. And I've personally had people point that out when they've gotten in touch with me. Oh, I see you volunteer because I work with a youth organisation. You know, they see it, even if they don't always comment on it.
And it gives credibility to the volunteering because you're actually tagging that organisation in LinkedIn. So it means that organisation can tell that you've done that. So it actually gives you credibility behind you putting it in there.
Exactly.
And Jared, this is probably one for you. Satya asks, any tips for getting my first part-time job here in Australia? And they have no experience.
Yeah, so obviously it's a bit of a different market at the minute where a lot of businesses are pulling back, but everyone is going to open up or is starting to open up. One of the things that I think more people are working right now is companies like Deliveroo and Uber Eats. Like that's a really easy way to go and get a part-time job if you really need to, because so many people are ordering breakfast, lunch and dinner at home right now. But yeah, look, use your network as best you can. If you want to work at Safeway, find a friend that works at Safeway and get them to help you with an application. Use your own network to find part-time jobs.
There's quite a few questions here asking whether, how to prepare for interviews. Now, we recently did a webinar on that, so go back and have a look at that recording. So we're not going to cover that today because it's a little bit outside of our scope. There's quite a few people, Megan, who asked whether you would be happy to review their CVs. Is that something that you would do, or is it necessary?
Wrong question again.
Thank you, Jared. No, look, I think the best thing you can do is do what I would do. I would be comparing it immediately with what I find on LinkedIn. You're telling me you want to be a marketing assistant for Nintendo. I'd be looking at Nintendo's LinkedIn page and the people who work there, and find the parallels there, do the research and put my profile up on LinkedIn to match.
You said earlier, if you prepare a really good LinkedIn profile, you click one button and it produces your CV.
Exactly. You just say, share it as a PDF, and up pops a PDF document of your LinkedIn profile with all the things you would otherwise put into a CV, only better.
Yeah. So Andrew Tag's got a good one. This is for you, I think, Jared. A web developer, should I include my GitHub and the personal websites that he's created, I'm going to say it properly, in my LinkedIn profile? And he's actually written that. So Andrew, well done. You've been listening. So
mate, absolutely. Yes. To me, the first thing I'll do is I'll go to your GitHub. I'll stop reading anything else and I'll just go check out your GitHub. It's like when you meet a graphic designer, you say, just show me the stuff you've designed. I don't care about what's on your CV. That stuff is really powerful because it shows that you have actually done it. Not you've learnt about it, not you've read about it, you've done it. And that is really powerful.
And does that go the same with self-study, Jared? Because we've been talking about self-study quite a bit in the last few webinars.
Yeah, I love meeting people that have done a Udemy course or a Coursera course. Maybe they want to get into data. And so they've actually bothered to go and do a 3-hour course on Udemy on a Saturday night about learning how to use Tableau. Or I'm currently doing the MySQL database course on LinkedIn Learning, on Lynda. Yeah, because I want to learn about SQL databases. So on my spare time, I'm sitting on the couch and, my partner's watching Housewives of Dallas or something, and I'm learning about SQL databases. So that self-learning part is so important. You've just got to be doing it.
Right. Carolina.
And you can combine that. Sorry, Dom.
No, go on.
You can combine that with the networking. That's the beautiful thing about a lot of online learning.
Yeah. Because you can go to networking events and show people what you've done. But here's one for you, Megan. Any tips on my first post on LinkedIn? From Carolina.
A lot of people introduce themselves, or they jump in with something that they're passionate about. So if you're a graphic designer, for example, you might say, what always inspires me are the autumn leaves in Melbourne, blah, 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 blah. So you write something that speaks to your passion, but also connects with your career.
And for those who are a little less confident, I might add that a really great way to start with posting on LinkedIn is find an article about something that you either agree or disagree with, hopefully agree with, and share that and just write one sentence about why you agree with it or why you think it's so important. That's a great way to get started. But here's another one for you, Megan. Ruth says that she's got a 9-month gap in her work experience. Should she come clean about it? Should she include it, or how do you explain it?
I think you've got to just say it as it is, and then have a very clear, succinct answer when the question comes up.
Yep.
So I saw a CV